Whatcha reading? I asked, seeing my wife smile as she sat on the couch, thumbing through a book. She held it up, and as I saw the cover, my heart sank. My high school yearbook. I hid that, I told her. Poorly. So I knew it was juicy. And with your reunion coming up, which I will not be attending. Ah, she pouted. Do I embarrass you, Tinker Bell? She beamed, holding up the page with pictures from the Halloween dance. Ugh, I'd really hoped to avoid this. Megan scooched over and I sat down next to her, furrowing my brow as I saw the hated photo. I shrugged, trying to downplay it. This girl I knew dared me to dress up in her old costume. She was cute and I was stupid. She even did my makeup. Talented girl. I didn't recognize you until I saw the caption. Yeah, that was a problem. For fun, once we got to the dance, she convinced everyone I was a girl who was visiting from out of town. You minx! That was bad enough, but then she kept going out of her way to mention how I'd just broken up with my boyfriend, and before I knew it, these football players were hitting on me. I was so scared that when they asked me to dance, I said yes. One guy even kissed me. John. I know. It was not my finest hour. Did they figure it out? Who, yeah. After that, my nickname was Tinker Bell. Not ideal in an all-guys school. Ouch. And the football players? It was bad. Keith, the guy who kissed me, I paused, feeling a sudden rush of emotion from the memories. Even saying his name put a knot in my stomach. I felt like a helpless kid being bullied all over again. Megan took my hand. Oh, John. I hated him so much. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far. Han, you didn't do anything, no. Not then. Afterwards. After months of bullying, I wanted to hurt him like, forever. I wanted to scar him for life. But this guy, he was a punk. He was hot shit back then, star athlete, sexy girlfriend, but you could just tell that he was going to flame out in the real world, ending up as one of those has-beens whose life peaked in high school. So in front of everyone I made him a bet. He was going for the state rushing record, and he wouldn't shut up about it. So I bet him that he'd fail. What happened? I took the book and flipped to his entry. The spine had a crease there from all the times I'd looked at it. Glaring amid all of the pages of young smartly dressed guys was a full-page senior ad that had Keith's name in a flowery script above a series of pictures of a heavily made-up girl looking rather sullen in various formal and casual dresses. She had broad shoulders and muscular arms, but had nice legs, pretty in her high heels. In one picture, the photographer had coaxed a small smile where she actually looked rather lovely. That one was my favorite. I give him credit for going through with it. They almost didn't print it, but I had friends on the yearbook committee. And this could have been you? I nodded. I couldn't leave that town fast enough, so if I lost and had to prance around in dresses one last time, I didn't care what they thought of me. But Keith? I knew he'd be reliving his big man on campus days for the rest of his life, and I wanted to poison his memory of that place forever. I wanted to ruin his life by destroying the only thing he cared about, his legacy. I looked to Megan. I'm not proud of what I did. John, you were just a kid. You were hurting and you lashed out. I just nodded slowly and she glanced back at Keith's pictures. Whatever happened to him? No idea. Last I heard, he was working at Hooters. She looked at me in surprise. I smiled. Oh, no. As a short order cook, or something. Oh, she smiled back. My smile faded. I mean, I just assumed. My eyes cut down to the smiling girl on the page, then back to Megan. Curious about that reunion now? She asked. A few weeks later, I stood outside the restaurant in the cold, wondering for the dozenth time if this was anything like a good idea. Keith hadn't been at the reunion the night before, but from what I'd heard, I didn't know what to think. If he'd just been the same old asshole working in a dead-end job, I had no interest in seeing him. Lording my comparative success over him would have been pointless and childish, and in my heart I knew that doing something petty like that would only give the ghost of that abusive bully power over me now in the present. But it changed things. Didn't it? Megan offered to accompany me repeatedly, in that way she had, but I asked her not to come. Reopening these old wounds was going to be hard enough without trying to put on a brave face in front of her. Coming in, a young woman's voice said, catching me by surprise. She was a waitress decked out in the standard orange and white Hooters uniform, and she was holding the door open for me with a friendly smile on her face. Ooh. Chilly, she said, her skimpy tank top offering scant protection from the cold. I stood there for a moment uncertainly. You look like you could use a beer, she said with a grin. You have no idea, I said as I entered. The lunch rush hadn't started, so the place was still relatively quiet, a calculated choice on my part, and I scanned the room nervously, looking over all the employees. As I did so, the young waitress furtively watched me with some small amusement, obviously used to seeing men ogling the waitresses. But I was looking for something different. I examined the kitchen staff closely, but all of the guys there were too old or too short and stocky to be him. But I knew I was just avoiding the obvious. Table for one, the girl prompted me, holding a menu. I was about to agree when I suddenly realized that I was being watched. Slowly, I turned to see that halfway across the restaurant, one of the waitresses had stopped dead in her tracks and was staring at me with her mouth slightly open. Stupidly for a moment I wondered why she was staring at me before the last lazy synapse in my brain finally fired. It was, after all, why I was there. But as I stared back at her, I was having trouble reconciling the perky and wide-eyed blonde waitress in front of me with the memory of the abusive bully that had tormented me all those years ago. Here, or rather, she seemed to resolve something in her mind and started walking over towards me, and as she did so I tried not to stare. She was tall for a woman, not surprisingly, and her snug-fitting uniform revealed a cute figure, slender and with boyish hips. Her bosom was on prominent display in her low-cut tank top, and if I'm being honest, was probably her best feature. Breasts like hers might have been overlarge on another woman, but looked full and proportionate on her frame, balanced by her broad shoulders. Her hair was long and blonde, framing her face in loose waves in that styled just rolled out of bed look that I always rather liked and Megan derided. Without thinking, my eyes cut down to her very tight orange shorts, which were flat and lacked any kind of bulge in front. I chided myself mentally for expecting anything different. As we made eye contact again, her face confounded me. She was by no means the prettiest girl in the place, but not unattractive, relying heavily on makeup to emphasize her feminine attributes. She reminded me a little bit of the older sister that hangs out with her teenage sibling and is trying just a little too hard to recapture her fading youth. If I'd seen her on the street, I'm certain I'd have walked right past her apart from maybe in surreptitious once-over, but now that I knew who it was, I could absolutely see Keith peeking out at me from behind all the makeup and artifice, his squinting eyes, that pointed chin. I felt my repressed emotions come bubbling up to the surface, which were tempered only by my own uncertainty, especially given the sheepish glance that as my former tormentor was now giving me. "Hey, I'll get this one, she said to the other waitress, her voice low and husky, but undeniably feminine. And now that she was close, my eyes cut down to her plastic name tag that read Kelly. It was strategically perched on her bosom, obviously placed there to give guys an excuse to ogle her breasts. I was slightly embarrassed to admit that I took her up on her offer. They were nice. And, would you mind covering for me for a few minutes? She added. I'm gonna take my break a little early. She paused and glanced over at me apprehensively, obviously struggling for a word other than friend, and coming up empty. We need a few minutes to catch up. The other waitress agreed, and I followed Kelly over to an empty table. I sat on one of the stools and watched as she reflexively fell into a cute and obviously practiced little pose as she perched on the other stool and crossed her leg girlishly. Considering how I'd been checking her out, it amused me slightly to see that she seemed equally dumbfounded staring at me. I could tell she obviously wanted to say something, but didn't know where to begin. You know, I didn't recognize you at first, I admitted. It must have been the blonde hair. She broke into a nervous little giggle that at first was rather disarming until she looked up and made eye contact with me. Then, to my horror, hidden within her smile, I instantly recognized the sneering smirk that had accompanied countless torments years before, and it sent a shiver up my spine. She obviously read the change on my face as her smile vanished and was replaced with a look of distress. Look, John, she started hesitantly, you obviously came to see me, so if you just have something you want to tell me and then leave, I totally get it. Or if you came to gawk, I can get you a menu or whatever. And I know I've got no right to ask anything of you. Would it be okay if I say something first? Part of me, a bigger part than I cared to admit, wanted so badly to just tell her off, inflict some verbal abuse on her, and then storm out and never look back. And although I hadn't considered the possibility, taking her up on her invitation to gawk at her also had its appeal. The thought of my old enemy waiting on me while looking like a buxom blonde cheerleader had a deliciously cruel allure to it. But, faced with her earnest expression, I just nodded, unwilling to say anything aloud out of fear what might come out of my mouth if given the opportunity. She took a deep breath. I've thought about this a lot over the years. You know, what I'd say to you if I ever saw you again? I think that's why I never went to the reunions. At first I told myself I just didn't want to be singled out as the class freak or the one who's barely scraping by waiting tables, but truthfully, I was afraid of you. I didn't do a very good job at hiding my surprise. Oh, I didn't think you'd be violent or anything, but I was just so ashamed of what I'd done. When I think back on those awful things I did to you, it's like watching a movie of somebody else doing them. But it was me, and I have to live with that. I guess we both do. And I wish to God I could go back and take it all back, but I can't. All I've got to offer is that I am so sorry for the hurt I inflicted on you. I truly am. Her voice had picked up a tremulous quaver and she blinked quickly, looking like she might be on the verge of tears. I swallowed hard and grit my teeth, trying to get my surging emotions under control. God, I wanted to hate her so badly. To yell at her, to scream obscenities until she broke down in tears crying. To hit her and twist her arm until she cried uncle and felt the pain I used to feel. To mock her and humiliate her, and make the former football jock feel crippling shame for the way he was flaunting his tits more brazenly than any of the cheerleaders he used to bed. Except, to my surprise, I didn't hate her. This woman sitting in front of me wringing her hands and fidgeting with her bracelet was thoughtful and awkward, timid and contrite. She'd offered to quietly accept whatever reprisal I'd come here to exact, only wanting first to have an opportunity to ask my forgiveness. Where the hell was my enemy? I felt myself trying desperately to cling to my anger, telling myself that this didn't change anything, that she was still the same scumbag who'd beaten me up, humiliated me, tormented me. But the more I looked at her, the less I saw of the bully and the more I saw that forlorn teenage girl standing awkwardly in her pretty flowered sundress. The teenage punk who tormented me was gone, destroyed far more completely by the woman before me than I ever could have. And this woman wasn't my adversary. My emotions roiled within me as my anger, now lacking a target, struggled to find purchase, and I took an unsteady breath as I struggled to get a grip on my feelings. She was still looking at me expectantly, and I knew that I had to say something, but I still didn't trust my own voice. Only this time, it wasn't for fear of what I might say in anger, but rather for fear of opening the floodgate of cathartic emotions, now clamoring for release. So again, wordlessly, I nodded, letting her know that I heard her. That I understood. And that I forgave her, even if I wasn't able to say the words. She managed a weak smile and sniffled, nodding her thanks. If it makes you feel any better, I've spent pretty much my entire adult life trying to get rid of that asshole. I looked at her then, so unexpectedly vulnerable, so human. But it made me think of my own sins, one in particular that had been bothering me for years. One that had been preoccupying my thoughts ever since I learned where and who she now was. Kelly, I said, her name feeling so unfamiliar. That bet we made, I only did it because I wanted to hurt you, really hurt you the way you'd hurt me. I know. It's just, I knew it would get to you, maybe even eat at you over the years. But, I only wanted to embarrass you. I never thought that you would, well, you know. Her face changed from a look of puzzlement into a look of abject astonishment. Then she burst out laughing. She laughed for several seconds, at first seemingly out of relief and then, I wasn't sure what. She was covering her mouth and trying to get herself under control even as people at other tables were looking at us, trying to see what was so funny. I was starting to feel a little uncomfortable as she settled down. Oh, God, oh, I am so sorry, she said, catching her breath. I swear I'm not making fun. It's just, you really thought I decided to become a woman just because I was embarrassed over our bet? I cleared my throat. Okay, it sounds dumb when you say it out loud like that. John, she said, tossing her hair back over her shoulder and cocking her head to one side. She had a playful little smirk that reminded me of Keith, but this time didn't dredge up all the negative feelings. You gotta understand, I know you just wanted to humiliate me, and at first, you really did. But the truth is, you gave me a gift. Maybe the most important gift anybody ever gave me. She held a hand over her heart. Kelly has been inside of me my whole life. But I was so angry and confused it might have been years before she was able to push through to the surface. Dressing up for those photos, it unlocked something in me I knew was there but could never put words to. I mean, I know this probably sounds stupid to you, but until I took those pictures, I never thought I could actually be pretty. And I thought if everyone saw me as a girl, it would destroy me. But it didn't. You've no idea how many nights I spent looking at those photos in our yearbook. I smiled in spite of myself. What? I used to look at those photos all the time, too. In my revenge fantasy, I would imagine you looking at those pictures and being tormented by them. Mission accomplished, she said with a smile. All this, she said, gesturing to herself, it's no picnic. Trust me, I've been tormented plenty. I'm sorry about that. Don't be. I'm not. This is who I'm supposed to be. That punk kid was a self-loathing bully who couldn't see past his own anger. I'm trying to be better. You are, I told her honestly. She shook her head slightly. You know, when I kissed you at the Halloween dance, I knew something was up. Maybe just unconsciously. But when I found out who you were, I just totally lost it. And though I could never have admitted it at the time, I really think it was because I was jealous of you. Come on. For real. You were out in front of everybody all dolled up. I would never have had the guts to do that. You were cute enough to fool people, and confident enough to eventually let everyone know who you really were. You even had a sense of humor about it. And I don't mind saying, you were one smoking hot little pixie. Seriously, if you ever decide to switch teams, I can recommend some doctors, she teased. I smiled. Yeah, I don't think my wife would appreciate that. Oh, you're married. 4 years now. She wanted to come, but, well, I wasn't sure how this was going to go. Yeah, I can see that, she said with a wince. She's the reason I'm here, actually. She dug up my yearbook, found our pictures, and convinced me to go to the reunion. If it had been up to me, I'd still be holding on to my anger. She sounds amazing. I'm sorry I won't have the chance to meet her. You're a lucky guy. Thanks, I said. You know, it's funny how things work out. I wonder what would have happened if it had been me that lost the bet. She smiled. Oh, I'm sure your pictures would have been very pretty. But if you're wondering if you'd be the one living as a woman now, I think any budding transsexual inclinations you might be harboring would have bubbled to the surface when you were dancing with the boys in your fairy costume. Ah, I said, giving her a fake smile, which she playfully returned. But that's not what I meant. I know. She sighed. You're wondering if I lost the bet intentionally. All kidding aside, that was a pretty convenient stumble that took you out of the game. She got a faraway look. God, I thought I'd never hear the end of that. All the guys on the team said I must have desperately wanted to dress up like a girl. I raised my eyebrows inquisitively. Well, I didn't do it on purpose, if that's what you're asking. Though sometimes I wonder if what caused Keith's misstep that day was actually Kelly taking her first step into the world. I nodded and smiled, not sure what else to say. I should probably go. Yeah, I need to get back to work, she agreed, standing up and holding out her hand. As I shook it, she said, I'm really glad you came. Me, too, I said. Then, impulsively I leaned over and gave her a quick kiss on the cheek. At first she seemed shocked, and then broke into a befuddled little grin. I shrugged and said, I figured I owed you one from the Halloween dance. She smiled, and as we parted company, I paused after taking a few steps. Hey, Kelly? I was just thinking, Megan and I were going to drive home this afternoon, but it's only a couple hours and I'm sure she wouldn't mind if we got a late start. If you're free after work, maybe we could grab some dinner and you'd get a chance to meet her? She seemed caught off guard by the suggestion, obviously a little choked up. She blinked twice quickly before giving a tight-lipped smile and nodding. Sure, okay. Great, I told her. It'll be good to catch up.